Hi, everyone. I'm Lana Zak. Thank you so much for joining us. President Trump visited Florida on Friday, where he focused his remarks mostly on Joe Biden, Democratic mayors, and protesters. One topic the president did not spend much time discussing was the coronavirus pandemic. Florida is one of at least 5 states reporting a new surge in cases in recent weeks. The state has reportedly seen a 1,400% jump in infections since it reopened. President Trump's visit comes one day after the state reported more than 11,000 new cases, as well as its highest record number of deaths since the pandemic began. Skyler Henry has the latest.
President Trump briefly addressed the coronavirus pandemic during a visit to U.S. Southern Command.
Before it hit, we were doing really well, and we're still doing very well, but now we're getting back on track.
His comments directly contradicted those of his top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who the president claims has made a lot of mistakes.
When you compare us to other countries, I don't think you can say we're doing great. I mean, we're just not.
Later, the president attended a roundtable on supporting the people of Venezuela.
We're testing at a level that nobody's ever tested before.
The Florida visit comes as the state grapples with soaring coronavirus cases. The president's Democratic challenger, Joe Biden, slammed the trip as a, quote, photo op and a distraction from his failures. President Trump also continues to push for schools to reopen this fall, threatening to cut federal funding to those that don't. Friday, he tweeted that he would direct the Treasury Department to look into the tax-exempt status of some colleges and universities.
We're working to safely and responsibly reopen our country, reopen our schools, get our country going again.
The president's threats on school funding have been criticized by some state and local officials, as well as congressional members of his own party.
I am completely opposed to any withholding of federal funding to schools.
Meanwhile, on the campaign front, the president's planned Saturday rally in New Hampshire has been postponed due to the tropical storm threat in the Northeast.
And Skyler joins me now from the White House. Skyler, we heard in your piece the president saying that Dr. Fauci has made a lot of mistakes. What is he referring to?
Well, if you remember from the beginning part of this entire pandemic, Lana, when these first initial things were coming out in terms of what doctors were saying, we heard from Dr. Anthony Fauci, who said that it wasn't crucial to wear things like masks. Now, medical experts are saying to wear masks and obviously remain 6 feet away from people as they try to curb the slope of this pandemic. The president is now saying that they made a mistake. At first they were saying don't wear masks. Now they're saying wear masks. And so that is the thing. But I think it speaks more so to the growing rift between the president and Dr. Anthony Fauci. We heard from Dr. Anthony Fauci in an interview today or yesterday where he said that he hadn't seen the president in weeks, and he hadn't actually briefed the president in some time now, at least not face-to-face or so. And the president has consistently, as of late, called Dr. Fauci out on what he calls mistakes. I mean, when it comes down to things like Dr. Fauci saying in a subcommittee hearing last week, saying things like we could see 100,000 cases a day, and the president simply disagreed with that. And then when it comes down to just reopening the economy altogether in and of itself, we've heard the president, the vice president, and several members of the task force try to say that they want to get the country open as quickly as possible. We heard Dr. Fauci, on the other hand, say that it may be time to consider for states to actually reverse track and go back a few phases in order to get these coronavirus outbreaks under control, particularly in states where we're starting to see these spikes, like in Arizona, like a Florida or a Texas. And I think there's just a rift there between what the medical experts are saying and what the president wants, because he wants to get this economy back up and running, Lana.
Okay. You also mentioned the president's trip to Florida, Skyler, and how there was very little discussion of the pandemic despite that major surge in cases. Why is that?
Well, I think the president is trying to shift the focus from the pandemic. Obviously, he's addressed it. He feels as though the administration has had a tremendous response, his words, in order of how he's dealt with the pandemic up until this point. But now he's trying to focus on other parts of the things happening across the country. Him down in Florida speaking to the relationship with Venezuela in terms of America and showing that Venezuela has American support, things like that. But then you also have to remember this, too. The president is trying to win re-election here. He's also supposed to be at a private donor event a little later on today before he heads back here to D.C. And so because of that, he's kind of juggling both the pandemic and the criticism that comes from that. But then also he has to try to figure out how he can win re-election. I mean, one of the big things that he touts all the time is a strong economy. He references that pretty regularly. And the fact that we could see these coronavirus numbers spike again and then impact things like employment again, and obviously businesses having to shut down over again, that doesn't do well for his base. And so he's trying to gin up support again so that he can kind of tout the strength of the economy and show that it is growing again. And that speaks to what I was talking to before about the kind of rift between Dr. Fauci and him, where he wants to get this economy back up and running, and that includes getting students back in school and trying to get as many things back to normal, quote unquote, as possible.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about that issue of getting students back to school this fall. I know that as much as everybody is interested in having students going back to school, getting life back to normal, having the economy up and running again, the president continues to work, it seems like, at odds at times with his health experts. How important is it for him politically that schools are reopened in the fall?
Well, I think it speaks to something that Vice President Mike Pence said earlier this week, and that is to get America back up and running again, you have to get America's schools back up and running again. And that simply just refers to the fact that parents aren't going to necessarily go back to work if their kids don't have a place to go, not only for learning and things like that, but for simply childcare. And so when you take that into consideration as well, of course, the president is going to put more emphasis on making sure that schools are reopened again. Now, as for what we've heard from health officials and education officials as well, they are concerned that there isn't a proper plan in place, at least generally speaking, in terms of safely doing that. We heard from the president of the National Educators Association earlier this week, who said that some of the teachers are actually afraid to go back into their classroom. Think about it when you were in school and you think about students that have to go inside of a classroom, and you think about what happens, 25, 30, 35 students in one classroom. Well, how do you socially distance in an environment like that? We've heard of education officials coming up with different solutions for that problem, but still no one area has a concrete solution for this. And so I think you see a lot of school districts across the country adamant about getting their students back in school, but trying to figure out how to safely do so. And that includes things like maybe doing so online, or having kids come in maybe 2 or 3 days out of the week and then learn for the rest of the 2 days during the week. And so there's still a bit of a disconnect as to what to properly do. But the president wants to make sure that he gets kids back in school. He's threatened to pull federal funding from that, and he's received some criticism from people on the other side of the aisle and people who are actually in his own party, Lana.
Well, Skyler, one other question for you. As we saw in your piece, the president was asked by reporters earlier about a possible pardon for Roger Stone, and he said that he's looking at it. What's the likelihood of the president taking some action related to his former associate?
Well, I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse and say that it's something that's happening right now, but it is something that has been hinted toward for some time now. And the president has said for months now that he believes that his friend Roger Stone was treated unfairly by this process, and he feels as though that everybody from President Obama and Vice President Biden to former FBI Director James Comey were doing illegal activities, and he feels as though they were supposed to be prosecuted for that, but instead he feels feels as though Roger Stone was treated unfairly. Now, when you take into consideration the fact that Attorney General William Barr feels as though that Roger Stone received the appropriate amount of sentencing, that 40 months or so, and a judge actually said that she was leaned on by the higher-ups in the Justice Department to go easy on Roger Stone. I think it remains to be seen exactly what we will see as far as a pardon or a commuting, but in terms of what the president will do, that remains to be seen. But if it happens, it should happen relatively quickly, as Stone is set to report to prison next Monday.
All right, Skyler Henry at the White House. Thank you.
Thanks, Lana.